The rain had been falling all afternoon, turning the sidewalks into streams and the city into a blur of gray and silver. Cars splashed by, horns sounded in the distance, and people hurried under umbrellas, heads down, eyes focused anywhere but the small shape sitting on the bench by the bus stop. She couldn't have been older than 7, her wet hair sticking to her cheeks. Clothes heavy with water, shoes making a soft squish with every shift of her tiny frame. In her trembling arms, she clutched a baby wrapped in a thin blanket that was soaked at the edges. The baby let out quiet, weak cries, his lips pale, his little fists opening and closing as if searching for warmth that wasn't there. But no one stopped. They saw her, maybe, in the quick, guilty flicker of their eyes. A crying girl and a crying baby at the bus stop on 5th and Layton wasn't enough to break the rhythm of rush hour. People kept moving, afraid to get involved, telling themselves someone else would step in. Someone else always did. But someone else never came. Her name was Maya, the baby in her arms. His name was Noah. Maya's shoulders were too small for the weight she carried. Not just the baby, but the memories, and fear pressing down on her chest. She tried to remember how her mother used to hum softly, how it calmed Noah when he cried, but her own throat was too tight to sing. Instead, she rocked him gently, her fingers numb from the cold. Every so often, she whispered his name, as if that alone could keep him awake, keep him safe. Behind her, the city was alive with noise. But around her, it felt painfully quiet. The kind of quiet that made her feel invisible. The kind of quiet that made her wish someone, anyone, would look past the rain and see her. But the people passing by were wrapped in their own lives, too busy or too scared or too tired to notice. The girl whose eyes were red from crying, whose hands were shaking, whose baby brother needed more than she could give. The rain kept falling, soaking through the thin blanket, dripping from Maya's hair onto Noah's tiny forehead. His cries grew softer, each sound weaker than the last. Panic burned in her chest, but there was nowhere to go, no one to run to. The last place she remembered feeling safe was gone now. The door shut gently in her face, by a stranger who didn't know her mother, who didn't know what that house meant to her. The small yellow house with the wind chime that used to sing in the breeze was just someone else's house now. Maya had knocked, hoping against hope, but hope hadn't answered. She sat back down on the cold bench, her legs stiff and sore, her heart heavier than before. The buses came and went, doors hissing open and closed, but she didn't get on. Where could she go? Her eyes blurred with tears that felt hot, despite the chill in the air. She wiped them away with the back of her hand, smearing rainwater and salt across her cheek. Then, when it felt like the world had truly forgotten them, she heard something different. Not the rush of tires on wet pavement, not the murmur of hurried footsteps, but a soft, steady tapping. She looked up through the curtain of rain and saw him. A large German shepherd, his fur darkened by the rain but his eyes calm and sharp. He stood a few steps away, head slightly tilted, as if trying to figure her out. For a moment, Maya froze. Dogs could be dangerous, her mother had once warned. But this dog didn't look threatening. He looked present, watching her in a way no one else had all day. Slowly, carefully, he stepped closer until he was right in front of the bench. He didn't bark or whine. He simply sat down, tail resting on the wet pavement, ears alert but relaxed. Maya held Noah tighter, uncertain. But something about the dog's calmness eased the knot in her chest. The rain kept falling, soaking them all, but the dog didn't seem to care. He didn't look away, he didn't leave. His quiet company felt like an answer to a question Maya hadn't dared to ask. "Are we really alone? Are you lost too?" she whispered, her voice rough from crying. The dog blinked slowly, as if he'd heard and understood. Maya's shoulders sagged just a little. For the first time in hours, the cold felt a bit less sharp. Noah whimpered softly, his tiny face scrunched. In discomfort, Maya adjusted the blanket, trying to tug it closer around him. Her own fingers felt clumsy and cold, but she kept trying. The German shepherd watched every move she made, his gaze steady and kind, like he was waiting to see if she needed help. Then something happened that made her breath catch. The dog stepped forward, so close she could see droplets clinging to his whiskers, and gently placed his head on the edge of the bench, near her knee. He didn't try to take the blanket, didn't push, just stayed there, close enough that she could feel his warmth through the wet air. It was a small thing, but to Maya, it felt enormous. Someone had come. Someone had chosen not to walk by. In that moment, the street felt different. Like maybe, just maybe, the night wouldn't end the way it had seemed it would. But Maya still didn't know what would happen next. She didn't know where they would sleep, what they would eat, or who, if anyone, would come looking for them. The rain kept falling, and the bus stop stayed empty, except for a crying girl, her baby brother, and a dog who refused to leave. And, as darkness crept in, and the streetlights flickered on, the question hung in the air like the mist rising from the wet pavement. Why had the dog come, and what was he waiting for? The rain didn't let up. It kept falling in cold sheets, drumming against the metal of the bus stop roof and running in rivulets down the glass panels. Maya tried to pull the blanket tighter around Noah, but the edges were already soaked through. The baby's breath came in soft, tired sighs, and every now and then, his eyelids fluttered like he might wake and cry again. But exhaustion kept him quiet. The German shepherd stayed close, his fur dripping, but his eyes steady on Maya. She found herself glancing at him every few seconds, as if to make sure he was really still there. Each time, his calm presence steadied her, though she didn't know why. It was like he had decided she and Noah were his responsibility now, and Maya clung to that thought. Even if she didn't fully understand it, she thought back to how they ended up here. Just that morning, she'd woken up on the old sofa in her cousin's apartment, the smell of smoke and last night's dinner heavy in the air. Noah had been fussing in his makeshift cribble laundry basket, lined with a towel. Maya had gotten up quietly, careful not to wake her cousin or his girlfriend. She'd changed Noah, fed him the last bit of formula, and packed everything she thought they'd need into her backpack. Diapers, bottles, the small blanket that had belonged to their mother. She hadn't really planned it, but as she stood there, looking at Noah's pale, innocent face, something inside her had whispered that they couldn't stay. No one had been cruel, exactly, but no one had been kind either, and sometimes that felt worse. So, she'd slipped out before the sun rose, Noah bundled in her arms. She remembered every turn she took, hoping her memory of the neighborhood wasn't wrong. Her mother's house had always felt so safe, so full of warmth and laughter. But the door had opened to a stranger's confused face, instead of her mother's smile, and when he closed it again, it felt like the world had closed off too. Now, sitting there at the bus stop, Maya's stomach ached with hunger, and her arms felt heavy from holding Noah so long. The dog shifted beside her, shaking rainwater from his fur, and Maya whispered, "You can go if you want." But he didn't. He lay down instead, resting his head on his paws, eyes still on her. Across the street, lights from passing cars reflected on wet asphalt, making everything look like it was made of glass. People still hurried by, umbrellas bobbing up and down, but none came close. Maya lowered her head, pressing her cheek against Noah's, feeling the warmth of his skin. "It's okay," she whispered to him, though she wasn't sure it really was. Then, just as Maya's eyes were closing from sheer exhaustion, she heard a different sound. Tires crunching gently to a stop, a door opening and closing. She looked up, startled, and saw a woman standing a few steps away. She wore a dark jacket with a badge, and her short hair was damp under her hood. The woman's gaze softened when she saw Maya, and she crouched down slowly. "Hey there," the woman said quietly, her voice warm but careful, like she didn't want to scare Maya. "My name's Alina. Are you okay?" Maya didn't answer. Her grip on Noah tightened, and the dog still beside her lifted his head and watched Alina closely. Muscles tensed, but not aggressive. Alina noticed. Her eyes widened, just slightly, as she really looked at the German shepherd. "I know you," Alina whispered. "Your name is Max, isn't it?" The dog's ears flicked, and he stood, stepping between Maya and Alina, as if to protect the children for a moment. Nobody moved. The rain tapped softly against Alina's jacket, and Maya felt her own heart beating so loudly, she thought it might wake Noah. Alina stayed still, her eyes never leaving Max's. Then she spoke again, softer this time. "It's okay, Max. I'm just here to help." Maya's lips trembled. "Do you really know him?" she asked, her voice so small it almost disappeared in the rain. "I think so," Alina replied. "He used to visit sick kids at the hospital, a therapy dog. He's a good boy." Her gaze flicked to Maya. "And you? What's your name?" "Maya," she whispered. "And this is Noah." Alina nodded slowly, as if trying to make sense of it all. "You look cold. Can I help you when your brother gets somewhere warm?" For a moment, Maya hesitated, but Noah stirred in her arms, letting out a soft cry, and Max's calm presence beside her gave her courage she didn't know she had. She nodded, just once. Alina opened the back door of her patrol car. "It's warm inside," she said. Maya climbed in carefully, Max following without a sound. The car smelled faintly of coffee and wet cloth, but it was warm. The heat from the vents prickled at her damp skin. The ride felt longer than it probably was. Maya didn't speak, and neither did Alina. Outside, the rain streaked across the windows, blurring the city lights into smudges of yellow and red. Max sat close enough that Maya could feel the gentle weight of him against her side. At the small police station, Alina found them towels and a spare blanket. Another officer brought a bottle of warmed formula, and Maya fed Noah, her own hands, still shaking from the cold and fear that hadn't fully left her. Alina knelt beside them again. "Maya," she asked softly, "where were you going today?" Maya hesitated, then pulled a crumpled piece of paper from her pocket. The ink had run from the rain, but the address was still partly visible. "It was my mom's house," she said, her voice breaking. "But it's not ours anymore." Alina felt something tug at her heart. She knew what it meant to lose a home, to lose everything familiar. And looking at Maya's tired eyes, at Noah's small face, at Max sitting loyally beside them, Alina made a quiet promise to herself that she wouldn't let them be alone again. But just as things seemed to calm, the phone at the front desk rang sharply, breaking the moment. Another officer picked up, then turned, her face pale. "Alina, you need to hear this," she said urgently. Alina stood, worry clouding her features. Maya watched, her small heart racing, sensing that something bad had followed them even here. And in that heavy silence before Alina spoke, it felt like the safety they'd just found might slip away again. Elena's heart sank as she hurried to the front desk. The officer handed her the phone, whispering that someone had just called in about a missing child, a little girl, around 7, carrying a baby. Elena's eyes met Maya's across the room, and for a split second, fear flashed across the child's tired face, like she was about to lose everything all over again. "Hello?" Elena said quietly into the receiver. On the other end, a man's voice stumbled over words, explaining he'd woken up and found his cousin and her baby gone. His voice didn't sound angry, just tired, confused, and maybe relieved that someone had found them. "She's here," Alina replied softly. "They're both safe." Maya tightened her arms around Noah, worry clouding her small face. Alina walked back to her, crouched down, and placed a gentle hand on her damp sleeve. "Maya," she said, "your cousin called. He knows you're here." Maya's lips parted, her voice cracking. "Are you going to send us back?" For a moment, Alina couldn't speak. The thought of sending them back to an apartment where Maya felt invisible, where Noah's cries were met with silence, made her chest ache. Alina shook her head. "Not tonight," she whispered. "Right now, you stay with me." Maya's eyes filled with tears, and she nodded, pressing her cheek against Noah's head. Max sat closer, his fur brushing her leg as if to promise he wasn't going anywhere either. Later that night, in the small warmth of Elena's apartment, Maya sat quietly at the kitchen table, the glow of a single lamp making soft shadows on the walls. Noah slept beside her in a folded blanket, his tiny breaths steady and calm. Max lay at their feet, his eyes half closed but alert, as though still on watch. Alina made hot cocoa, stirring slowly, her hands trembling not from fear, but from something that felt strangely like hope. She placed the mug in front of Maya, who wrapped her cold fingers around it, and took a small sip. "Why did you help us?" Maya asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Alina paused, glancing toward the old photograph on her shelf, a picture of her daughter smiling, freckles across her cheeks. "Because," she said softly, "sometimes someone just needs to stop and see." The words hung in the quiet room, mixing with the sound of rain still falling softly outside. Maya looked at Alina, and for the first time since that morning, her shoulders seemed to lower, like a weight had been lifted just enough to let her breathe. In the following days, things slowly changed. Elena reached out to social services, explaining everything Maya had been through. The officers from the station brought over a second-hand crib and some clothes. Max followed Maya everywhere, his steady presence a silent promise that she wasn't alone anymore. One morning, as the sun pushed through the rain clouds for the first time in days, Alina filled out the paperwork to become their foster parent. Her hands trembled as she signed, not from doubt, but from wanting so badly to give them something that wouldn't be taken away. A few weeks later, a letter arrived. The words clear and simple. The guardianship was approved. Maya stood beside Alina as she opened it, holding Noah on her hip. When Alina whispered what it meant, Maya didn't say anything at first. Then, quietly, she reached out and hugged Alina, her thin arms wrapping around her waist. The baby pressed between them. "Thank you," she whispered, the words small, but full of all the hope and relief she'd carried alone for so long. In those quiet evenings, Maya began to laugh again. She helped Alina set the table, rocked Noah to sleep in the old rocking chair, and sometimes, when she thought no one was watching, she whispered secrets to Max, who listened without blinking. Noah started to smile more too, reaching out for Elena's finger, or grabbing at Max's ear when he got close enough. One night, after tucking Maya and Noah in, Elena sat on the sofa, Max curled up at her feet. She thought about how a chance moment a crying girl at a bus stop, a loyal German shepherd refusing to leave, had changed everything. Sometimes, family wasn't what you were born into, but what you found when you had nothing left. Maya, once a silent shape on a rainy bench, had become laughter in the small kitchen, soft humming at bedtime, and the gentle promise of tomorrow. Noah's sleepy sighs filled the apartment with warmth Elena hadn't felt in so long. And Max, who had found them first, remained by the door each night, as if still guarding the miracle he'd helped create. And so, what began on a rainy, crying girl clutching her baby brother, ignored by the world, became something quietly extraordinary. Because someone finally stopped to see them. Because the dog stayed when everyone else walked by. And because sometimes, even after the darkest rain, a new beginning is waiting just around the corner, if only someone dares to reach for it.